You got to operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast. I'm Daniel, and on this episode, we're going to take a look at the Gators' upcoming game against the Tennessee Volunteers. SEC season has arrived, and just like many years that I had growing up in the 90s and 2000s, the Tennessee Vols are our first SEC opponent. And this game, in many ways, is a measuring stick for the Gators and Billy Napier. Very exciting game. We don't know too much about who the Vols are. We do know that they're 2-0. We do know that their two games were against Virginia in Nashville and a home game against Austin P. Meanwhile, we've seen what the Gators did on the road in Utah, which of course was not the best experience. However, we did handle the game pretty well against McNeese State at home, this past weekend. This game against Tennessee is a night game. First night game against Tennessee since 2 years ago when Tennessee came to the Swamp. I only bring that up because I saw a question earlier on one of the social media apps saying, I always thought this was a 3:30 game. And of course, the first answer was last time they were here, it was also a 7 o'clock kick on ESPN. That is Eastern Standard Time. I always have to say Eastern Time because my cousin who used to live in the mountain time zone would always say, make sure you say Eastern Time. So we're adding that, making sure that's there. And I know that we do have listeners from all over the United States. So might as well throw that in anyways. But hopefully we have a good show for you. Lots of fun to be had. Definitely an interesting game to be talking about. I am excited. And of course, I've got to be wearing all blue because this is Tennessee week. For those of you listening on audio and the people here watching on video probably noticed that the accent lights behind me are all blue. Usually one is orange, one is blue, but it's Tennessee week. They are both blue because we do not wear orange in Tennessee week. And I've been known, and I don't mind who hears this, I've been known that if you wear orange showing up to Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, showing up to the Swamp during a Tennessee game, I have welcomed you as a Tennessee fan to the Swamp, said, hope you enjoy Gainesville. People look at me funny, but it's been well over a decade since we've established we wear blue to Tennessee as a fan base, and I'm pretty sure we've asked for a blue out every single year since at least 2014. So this is nothing new, or I say 2014, 2013. So this is nothing new. And at this point, you're on the train or not. Just small little rant from me. With that said, let's get into some of the key storylines for the game. Alrighty, the first storyline we have, of course, and this has been talked about a lot, makes me a little bit nervous. It's been talked about a lot, and I'll get into why in just a sec. But that is the Vols have not won in the Swamp since 2003. I do remember that game, gave up a Hail Mary going into the halftime, and I believe that was a noon kickoff, really hot. Remember that game not being much of a fan, and of course, it ultimately was one of many factors that ended up leading to Ron Zook's end of tenure for the Gators the following year. With that said, when I hear stats like this go on, like it's been so long, when they're really hyped on, that's when I start to think of, it was that way in 2016. I think of 2007 when ESPN Game Day said, oh, the Gators always beat the Bulldogs, and Tim Tebow's in his hometown. Gators win. I think of, 2016 with the Vols. Have you ever seen a duck pull a truck? I think of Tim Tebow, SEC Nation 2018, flippantly, just like game day in 2007, talking about Gators always beating Kentucky. So when I start to see these streaks and stuff get lots of play, there's a part of me that gets a little cautious about that. And maybe it's just superstitious, but that is something that has been thrown around. And with that said, I do think there is some mentality that goes to that and puts the pressure on the Vols as favorites, but also think, man, our past teams, and we've had just as good teams, come into the swamp and lose because of a 4th and 14, miracle play. I've seen us throw up or seen us lose because a Gator player threw up a long pass or Hail Mary, however you want to define it. I know some people say you have to have everyone standing in the end zone for it to be a Hail Mary. And I look at the first play with Roger Staubach that was really referred to as a Hail Mary from 1975, and the runner almost never breaks stride and doesn't even catch the ball in the end zone and continues to run into the end zone. But whatever your definition of Hail Mary is, the point is Brad Nessler, Hail Mary full of grace for the Gators, 2017, great time. Um, just so many different ways we've found to come out with this game in Gainesville. Of course, 2005, I've got a picture somewhere. Wish I could have found it to put it on here. I've got face paint on and fresh face, first year in college with my college roommate, my brother, our friends Austin and Chris. And Austin's probably been with me to more Gator games than my brothers in the last decade, or it's close. um, we're there before the game, end around play, we score. It's been a lot of pressure, lots of just different ways we've beaten the Vols. Of course, 2007, we run up the score on them. Cam Newton hits a touchdown. I will not repeat some of the things I heard about people whining about Cam Newton being in instead of John Brantley. I think the history has shown enough of why that whining was wrong, but is what it is. I'm sure I've put it somewhere if you really want to go searching for it, but I won't repeat it on here. That's definitely a good way to get canceled. Um, that said, also since 2003 and that loss to the Vols, the Gators are 16-4 against the Vols. And if we win this year and we move that first game from 2003 to 2004, Gators go to 17-3 in the last 20. But if we lose, it stays at 16-4. But it'll also be our first time losing back to back since 2004, 2003. I think the pressure is on the Vols as they have this mindset of what can we do to get over this 2-decade long hump? What is it going to take to beat Florida? We've not really played well against Austin P. We've played all right against Virginia, but this is a Virginia team who is still coming back from tragedy last year. What can we do? Yes, the Gators didn't look good against Utah, but we've not looked good either. So there's a lot of things, and then also a lot of people expecting the Vols to win and putting that expectation as favorites on the Vols. So how they handle that pressure will be interesting to see. The second storyline, I've seen this all over the place, so I figured I'd address it, is this a must-win game for Billy Napier? And I think the answer to that, honestly, is maybe. And I'm not saying this a must-win as in if we lose, he's fired. That's not at all what I'm saying, because I know some people will think that. But what I would say for the maybe and the must-win is if you do not beat this Tennessee team, what's the mindset of this team? Now we're 2-2. Does it make Kentucky look more daunting? Obviously, it would make Georgia, LSU in Death Valley, FSU a little bit more daunting. And now we're looking at best, at best, 7-5 if you just had the two previous losses and lose those three. And I'm not saying we're losing those three. I'm saying they look more daunting. And you're looking at, okay, here's where we are with no margin for error against some of these teams that we've dropped a few against recently, like a Kentucky or Carolina. And if you start to go down that bad road, does it send into a tailspin? Maybe, maybe not. But because of that, if you win this, a lot of these storm clouds that I've gathered start to separate a little bit. They don't fully go away, but there's a lot more light at the end of the tunnel. Now you beat the Vols, and it looks like, okay, Kentucky's not as daunting, and maybe we can go to Death Valley. Maybe we can pull a shocker in Jacksonville. Yes, FSU looked good against LSU, but this is at home. Look what we did to Tennessee at home. So the mindset of just both the team and fans going forward, yeah, I don't want to say it fully hinges on this game, but the outlook does look a lot different, especially when the Gators have lost 4 straight games to FBS opponents. If that comes to 5 straight FBS losses, you know, those are two different mindsets of, hey, we just beat a Vols team we weren't supposed to beat, because a lot of people are picking the Vols versus, hey, we've just lost our 5th straight to an FBS opponent. At least we have Charlotte coming in so we can say, yay, next week against FBS opponents. But Charlotte also led Maryland for a little while before losing last week. With that said, the third storyline coming into the game is this is Milton's first true road game starting in the SEC. That includes back in 2021 when he was a starter before he got injured and Herndon Hooker took over the role. And I know some people say, well, he was the starter for the Vandy game last year. If you believe a Tennessee Volunteer game in Nashville, Tennessee is an actual Vandy home game and not like massively, Vandy fans outnumbered um, by volunteer fans, then I don't know what to tell you. Point is, that Vandy game does not count. I believe if I were to look at game film right now, it's probably 80-20 Tennessee fans in Nashville. Heck, it's that way for most fans that travel to Nashville and Vandy. So, with that said, first true road game, and it's in one of the most hostile environments that you can go to in the SEC. Gator fans are desperate right now for something good, and I think that makes the Gator fans want to get into the game more. And the Gators really need to have the fans involved, get loud often and early. And we will talk about some of my feelings on third down in just a minute, but get loud early often. Try to throw Joe Milton off of his game and try and make an impact on this Tennessee offense. If the loudness can cause some miscommunications, maybe a false start, that can probably change some of the trajectory of this game if that were to happen early and if the Gators stay on top of it. When you listen to Nick Saban or Utah, from 2021, Utah fans from last year, Auburn from 2019, talk about this is one of the most crazy atmospheres we've ever been in. This is one of the, most intense or loudest atmospheres we've ever played in. That is some game changing stuff. And fans get involved early and often and be loud, wear blue, help make Milton's first true road game in the SEC be something he remembers and not in a good way. Moving on to the Gators offense against the Vols defense. The first key out for the Gators is to establish the run. The Gators currently average 170 yards rushing per game. I'm not sure how I feel about that stat. I mean, we definitely ran it down McNeese State's throats last week. However, we did not have much success against Utah. And again, I addressed it previously. I know some people said we should have ran more. But when we ran as much as we did, averaging about 2, maybe 3 yards per carry, that's not going to get the job done. And I don't know why continuing to force a square peg into a round hole is a great idea. I know the answer is maybe the defense tires down and you're able to have more success, but also when you're down by 3 scores and this team has not ever shown, at least in the last year and a half, that it can speed up its process, then you're wasting a ton of clock time as well to make a comeback. With that said, establish the run early. We've got Kingsley Eggleston coming back at center, and that's going to improve the interior line. It's also going to have a veteran who can help call out, different adjustments along the line and blocking assignments. So that's going to improve the line. But how much does that matter if the Vols are stacking the box? Because at some point, the numbers do matter. If there's 7, 8 guys in the box, your 5-man offensive line, maybe 6 guys with a tight end, 7 guys with a tight end. But if we're playing 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, you better believe it's going to include getting more people in that box than just 6, 7, 8 guys, as the formation will be a lot tighter, which means it's a lot, less wide and spaced out. So it's really not going to be great for us if we can't establish the run. But if we are having problems establishing the run, if we cannot run, establish the pass to open the run. The Gators are averaging 283 passing yards per game, and the Tennessee defense is allowing 183 passing yards per game. Gave up 260 yards to Austin P last week, including a 52-yard touchdown. Last year, the Vols, I believe, were 127th in pass defense. For comparison, the Gators were 129th last year in third down percentage allowed on defense. So think about how bad our third down defense was. That's how bad their pass defense was. And now they might have improved some, but it's something we need to take care of. And I can be a broken record and talk about let's have quick passing to force them. And quick passing doesn't just mean screen routes. I've said that before. Quick slants, things that get your guy into space, which of course is my next key for this offense, which is to get playmakers in space with the ball. Yesterday I was looking at Twitter and people were talking about essentially trying to make it about, well, hey, we couldn't throw deep too much on I almost said Austin P on McNeese State because they're playing 2-3 high safety, cover 3, cover 4. So that's why we had to do all the dump offs and screens. Well, yes, and the way the plays are drawn up, yeah, that's true. However, there are other routes, like if you ran, and this is the example I gave, shallow cross. Percy Arvin, his breakout play was a long touchdown reception against UCF. He ran underneath those linebackers that started to drop in the space because the safeties were dropping. We got on the ball, shakes off a linebacker, outruns everyone to the end zone. I'm not saying that Eugene Wilson or Ricky Pearsall or Percy Arvin, but the same concept does apply. Get the ball in space, let them run and make a play. Much better than, hey, constantly catch the ball 2, 3, 4 yards behind the line and let's hope you make a man miss and get a few yards. There are things we can do, and I hope we do to help open up this run game because we cannot run if teams are not afraid of our passing game and stack the box. I know people will point out we threw for 333 yards against Utah. Did the math this morning, looked it up because of conversation I was having, and I believe 114 pass yards were how much we had before we were down by 3 scores. And then once we were down by 3 scores and Utah was letting us get the small little chunks for the most part, that's when we put up over 200 yards in the last quarter and a half. A little bit different thing than if our passing offense was dominating. Not saying it can't be good. Can't say it. Not saying it was terrible that game, but there are situations we need to think about and we need to try and open up the run game if we cannot establish it with passing. I do think a favorable matchup are the Gator receivers against the Tennessee DBs because they're 127th in passing last year and because they've done things like allow 260 yards passing to Austin P last week. Moving on to the Gators defense against the Vols offense. The first key is to stop the run. Tennessee is a top 5 rushing offense in the nation right now, rushing for 257.5 rushing yards per game. And the Gators run defense is pretty well. I think they're top 25 at allowing 75.5 yards per game. It's easy to say, well, we put up great numbers against McNeese State, but we also put up pretty good numbers against Utah. I mean, we held Utah's best running back, Jaquindon Jackson, to 15 yards and 3 yards per carry. So our front 7 has actually done quite well against the run. So it'll be interesting. just like we get Kingsley Eggleston back, they're going to get Cooper Mays back at their center position. So they're going to have a center who's going to come in and make a change to that offensive line, just like we are. So it'll be curious to see, does he make them better? Do they stay about the same? How will our front seven do against possibly the best running offense we will see? A lot of people don't realize last year Tennessee ran the ball just as well as we did. We think of how great our run offense was last year. The difference was 0.5 yards per game between us and Tennessee. And so this is the Tennessee team that is dangerous on the ground. We think of passing, but it's the ground that we need to worry about first, because for all the things that can be said about their passing offense, and I'm about to talk about, it doesn't matter if Tennessee can run the ball. So the first key is to stop the running game. The second key is make passing difficult for Milton. Milton has somewhat struggled. Tennessee, who's known for an explosive passing offense, although, like I said, their run game is also really good. They average only 220 passing yards per game so far this season, and that's against Virginia. That's against Austin P. But then again, how much do you need to pass or show off your passing game when you're running so well? And I know there have been some difficulties with Milton, and he sometimes has accuracy problems, but other times he's been all right. Let's make it difficult for him. The Gators pass defense has only given up 115.5 yards per game. That translates to 231 total yards passing. And when you think 70 of that came on one play, we're talking about almost a third of the Gators passing, yardage allowed so far this season was on one play where the safety bit up. Now, there are reasons he bit up, including a guy slipping. But if he doesn't bite up, that play isn't what it is. If the guy doesn't slip, that play isn't what it is. So take away that, disaster of a play. We've done pretty well in pass defense. And if Milton's not on top of his game, if we're getting loud, if the defense is getting pressure, it could be difficult for him to throw, or at least I hope so. And that's what my third key is: get the pressure on Milton and play tight man coverage. Gator Nation Football Podcast said last year, said this year, this is how you play defense against this Vols tight man coverage. And of course, last year we played zone and they threw it all over us. And they had some good runs, including by Hooker, had a number of long runs in that game because of just these zones. But with tight man coverage, I know I've said it before in other situations, but with tight man coverage, that means smaller windows, and especially if you have accuracy issues, small windows are not always the best at throwing. You have smaller windows. There's more time you have to take for guys to get open. And for example, let's go back to that first Utah play. If the guy doesn't fall who's playing man coverage to cause the safety to come up, we're probably getting a sack there because he's going to have to take another, second or two. And our guys are pretty close on him when he releases that ball. In this game, same concept. To get our guys, more pressure, make them hold on to the ball for another second or two because there's tight windows, because you're playing your assignments, because if you're a safety in zone, you're not moving out from where the, corner's directing the player rightfully, which is he's funneling them to you to allow something over the top. And we should, in theory, be good. With that said, favorable matchup, I do believe, is the Gators cornerbacks and star position against the Tennessee receivers. With that, I do have this caveat for all the stuff talked about. Hey, they lost a lot of their great receivers. They don't have anyone threatening. Tennessee's top two receivers against the Gators last year are on this team. And they've added, they've not added, but he's getting more play now. Didn't really play last year against us, and that Squirrel White. Yeah, say that 3 times fast. Squirrel White. And is there any more Tennessee volunteer name than that? With that said, these are guys we faced last year, but not quite the same quarterback that we faced last year getting the ball, and definitely a more disciplined, more fundamental, better scheme. So those are things I think that will help us going forward. New segment here this week, and it is called Truth Be Told. I actually got that from one of our listeners, and I might have tried doing one in the past, didn't go quite as well. And I want to talk about the whole money down thing at UF, which I'll be honest, it is what it is. I know money down was started when we got Jeff Collins coming to UF, and everyone celebrates this fired Georgia Tech coach and holds up their hands, does the money symbol. Cool, whatever. I don't mind if you do that. I don't really care. My problem is when I look around, see people in my section doing it, when I look on camera and see people doing it, it's like hands go up and mouths go shut. Be loud on third down. That's all I ask. If you want to just wave like you got money, if you don't want to clap, especially if there's, a clap count actually being done because it's a road game, and why have them hear 90,000 claps and possibly confuse when we could have our hands up, pretend we have money, and not be loud. But if you want to do that, again, I have no problem. I just ask that you get loud while doing it. In my observation, I'm sure there are people that are, but everyone in my section, I'll tell you, if I see them doing it in D, if I see them doing 9, and heck, if I've seen them doing it on camera, well, in a post game or, on the in stadium camera, usually, again, hands are up and mouth is shut. Get loud, support your team. I don't care if your hands are up and you're like, money, money, money. I don't care if you're clapping, doing the Gator chomp. Just be loud. Be loud and make third down the most difficult down for opposing teams in the swamp. And that is truth be told on the money down. With that said, let's go and talk about one of my friends, and that is my friends at Alvarez Lawn Company. If you are in the Central Florida area, please give my friends at Alvarez Lawn Company a call if you need any lawn projects done or if you need monthly, weekly, whatever yard care. Give them a call for or a text for a free quote at 407 490 2617. You can also reach out to them at Alvarez Lawn Company at gmail.com. Once again, that is 407 490 2617. Alvarez Lawn Company, building plans that work for you. And if you're tired of talking to people on the Twitter machine, or you just want to hang out at a place where discussing the Gators is a little more organized, well, then give my friends at Gator Chatter a bit of your attention. GatorChatter.com. And as I've said before, I do usually write previews and reviews. As I'm sitting here recording, I realize I may not have posted my review that I wrote up for the McNeese game. So guess what I'm doing once I'm done. But with that said, definitely check out GatorChatter.com. Lots of fun to be had there, including things like Tennessee look-alike threads. And with that said, GatorChatter.com, your Florida Gator sports bar. And with that said, everybody, this is one of the best times of the year once SEC play has started and Florida has began its road to see exactly what type of team we are in 2023. One of my favorite games every year is the Tennessee game. Some of that is growing up. This was the SEC team to beat. It wasn't Georgia. It wasn't Alabama. It sure wasn't Kentucky. This was a big game. This was a top 5 matchup. So that has always been instilled into me. And now, for the first time in a while, they are favored big. We're not expected to win. Even last year, it was kind of debatable who would pull this out. This year, almost everyone to a T is saying Tennessee's going to win this. And I think, the Gators have a good shot to pull the upset, especially if the run defense shows up and looks like it has the first 2 weeks of the season. As you know, I never give a pick that is against the Gators. I admit that bias, but my pick for the game is Florida 21, Tennessee 17. I know last time I gave the Gators 21, it was Utah and didn't work out too well, but hopefully this time it'll work out much better. I do think some of the accuracy issues of Milton, along with the atmosphere of the swamp and how well our defense has played fundamentally for most of the season, does take us a little bit to that next level and gets just enough to get the win in the swamp Saturday night. With that said, I want to thank everybody for listening. And as always, go Gators.